some certain people didn't like our line of questioning. And I think it was the fact that they know we have a story coming out about this makes certain people nervous. So they might have preemptively shut down their accounts because they are not sure what's coming.
To be honest, the report just made me feel a little bit disappointed. Not disappointed in the sense that the report was bad. It was disappointed in the sense that, our Cybertroopers have really declined in quality.
Hello everybody. So in September last year, we published a series of investigative reports uncovering a coordinated astroturfing network of at least 263 Facebook accounts, all working to artificially boost Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim's social media standing. So much grandiose, so much of praises, so much of adulation, and these are often set against a backdrop or backdrops of things that don't quite necessitate so much adulation. Usually it's against something more critical at some points. So the operation is usually involving using standard, often very, very templated sentences, structures, messagings, words like campaign boosters, which is then aimed at creating a false sense of grandiose to give you an impression that there is widespread support that is being generated for the man that is Anwar Ibrahim. So this prompted my colleague, Koh Jun Lin, to go and sniff out all the details and the intricacies and the workings that go into these astroturfing bots. And months of work and sleepless nights brought you the exclusive reports that Malaysiakini published on astroturfing. Now today, I have with me Koh Jun Lin and Dr Benjamin Loh from Monash University, Malaysia, to share their perspectives and insights on what is astroturfing and just how much damage astroturfing actually causes you and me as social media users and to the larger public discourse. So, Jun Lin, how do you feel after everything that you did throughout, 3 months of investigative reporting?
Relief.
I can tell.
Just glad to get this over and done with, frankly, because it was a lot of work.
It was. I saw everything. I saw the days and nights that you worked through. So, Jun Lin, could you strip it down for us? What did you find that made you say, something is so funny here, I need to go dig deeper and see how much of this is real, because a lot of it is not organic? What caught your interest?
It's actually started out not from me, but another researcher. I actually started out as a tip-off that something doesn't look right in the comment section of the Prime Minister's Facebook page. This researcher has also looked at a few other leaders from other parties and didn't quite see anything like this. But this researcher had other things to do, and it was up to me to dig deeper, which I looked at the material and decided to indeed look deeper. And this is basically what I found. There was, if you just casually scrolling the comment section on Anwar's Facebook page, I'm not sure about now, but at least at the time. After you scroll down a bit, you start to see a repeating pattern, and that was the pattern I was honing on when I was doing my investigation. As for why the Prime Minister, well, just because it's obvious and it's much easier for me to hone in on rather than to trying to find something where I haven't already established what the pattern is.
Because there was this question brought up by some people as to why this is even a report, because it is quite a norm. It is a normal practice in politics. It is a normal practice for a public figure to have fans or people who create accounts to boost his accountability online, to make him look great. You know, that sense of grandiose and manufactured sense of euphoria that everything is fine with the way this person is leading or this person is doing things. This was brought up as a point of contention as to why the report was pursued. So was anything targeted at you personally? Like, is this a personal agenda? Why are you just pursuing the Prime Minister?
There were questions along those lines. My answer to that is frankly just, number one, he's the top leader. He should be accountable. And the government itself has also told platforms like Meta to clamp down on what this is called coordinated inauthentic behavior. This is not allowed under the rules of these platforms, and it's also one that, since the government also wants to clamp down, then it will be strange if the government itself, or at least people who are working in the government's favor, is also practicing this behavior. Another problem with this is just the deception that goes on in it, but I think we can go into that later.
But it is only 263 accounts. Do you think it actually made any impact at all?
It's 263 accounts. They account for something like 6,000 comments of the 20,000 I analyzed, so it's a big chunk.
All right. Dr. Loh, from your research, are these signals that scholars recognize as astroturfing? Would you accurately point this as astroturfing? And how do these campaigns genuinely differ from, again, what we spoke about earlier, professional lobbying, right? How do you distinguish between the two, and how do you say what you're doing is illegal and fake and what you're doing is pretty all right because you have a face to whatever you're doing?
The term astroturfing is a term that often comes from the political space in, I think, American or Western countries, essentially. And it generally refers to the sort of like how political lobbying, which is, again, a legal act of trying to trying to represent how various grassroots or civil society organizations can throw their support towards certain elected representatives to push certain political agendas, policies, and whatnot as well. So astroturfing happens when you have got corporate interests who fund specific civil society organizations to then channel money. Because the idea here is that if it's a civil society that is sort of like lobbying through donations, those donations come from people. So it is seen as this is the will of the people who are supporting these agendas. But astroturfing is when corporate interests are channeling their and again, these are like billion-dollar companies who can channel much more than the average person in a much more structured manner, and that is which is why you see in most Western countries that do allow lobbying, even though it's legal. There's a lot of different ways that all these corporate interests like billionaires can all sort of like control the political space very, very indirectly in this manner. So that's generally what astroturfing is in the more traditional sense. So digital astroturfing, which is generally what people think about when you talk about in the digital space, is when you are trying to, it's similar in the sense that you're trying to misrepresent public support.
Okay.
So, but instead of how the public support is being used to influence policy directly, you're just trying to misrepresent public support towards certain issues, towards certain politicians, or towards certain agendas, essentially. So in this manner, the use of multiple accounts that are again done in a very deceptive manner. They are clandestine. They are trying to sort of like pretend to be real people, essentially what we call sock puppeting. And this is how, if you can do it on scale, you can do it at a large level, you can create the illusion that there is a large amount of either support or even antagonism towards certain political agendas. And this is why it is such a destructive force, because even though people always say that, yes, social media isn't real life, social media isn't public support, but for the average person who is what we call terminally online or perpetually online on their social media feeds, like their entire way of interfacing with the world outside of them is through their social media feeds, that actually is very, very powerful and can influence their perceptions quite a bit.
Okay. That's very well explained, Dr. Loh. But again, the question that some have, and at some points I also have a bit of curiosity, is, but the postings that we saw from this astroturfing bots were commenting on, or this fake accounts were commenting on, it usually points to certain campaigns, like maybe you say a campaign where a Madani campaign that has given, say, Sarah, for example, or something relating to public well-being. Do comments that praise the Prime Minister for doing this, or albeit it being manufactured, does it really give a huge impact compared to, say, comments on issues of corruption, issues of, economic issues? Do you find it to be harmless, or do you find it to be something that can still perpetuate some sort of impact later on?
Oh, there's definitely... Okay, so when it comes to astroturfing, the effect or the impact that it has on the population varies, So there's different kinds of engagement that can happen, So the easiest way to do astroturfing is just signal boosting, meaning like you just provide a large number of, impressions, or you just put a mass number of likes, impressions and whatnot. So that is enough to sort of like just show that this is amount of people are interested in this particular post or issue or whatnot as well. When you go into comments, that's when things get a little bit trickier. So which is why because you need to take a little bit more effort to give the impression that these are real people making specific comments and whatnot, to again give the illusion that these are real people talking about these issues, and you can sort of see a reflection of that. In my current research in looking at sort of like the way that sort of like Malaysians go through their everyday life as they process, information from various kinds of media, not just, like news media, but also from social media and other sources of information. It's really become quite common now that when people read anything that's in the news, they actually a lot of people have been trained to actually look at the comment sections just to get a feel for what are other people thinking about these things, what is the general, like they want to see where they should position themselves on the issue. Is this something that I want to support? Is this something that is aligned with my political interests and whatnot? And people go to the comment sections to look there generally as well. So if you are able to sort of like command a large army of bots or trolls to flood a lot of these comment areas with either positive or negative or any kind of comments, you're able to control the public perception of those spaces.
The total narrative.
Yeah, you can sort of like dominate, you can overwhelm, you can, you can even suppress other alternative voices if you have enough of a force doing that. I think the quote you mentioned just was like there were 200 over accounts. Yeah. That's a substantial number, especially on certain platforms like Facebook, where it's a lot difficult to track the different kinds of accounts that are there, essentially. So it is very, very powerful. It's very, very effective.
All right.
Yes.
Jun Lin, so how do you prove something like this? Like, there's just too many layers to peel, because sometimes it's just too real, right? People will not even be able to tell. Like for us, because in our daily jobs, we do scan a lot of things and we tend to form opinions and curiosities about things. But for the larger public, how do they actually read something like this? And for you, how did you actually try to prove something like this that is happening and it's at a worrying scale?
Okay, it's actually one of the hardest things to do in this kind of research, because this kind of digital astroturfing can look a lot like the real thing. So what I try to do is to have multiple layers of supporting evidence. It can never be conclusive, because that would take the level of access that I simply don't have. Maybe Facebook might, but I don't. So what I try to do is to look at the timing of their posts. I've been able to get a lot of these comments, and the exact time was posted. And if they were able to consistently make multiple posts very rapidly, that would be a sign that this account might not be genuine, because even for someone who is very prolific on social media, it might take us a while to post something, move on to the next post, see what's it about, watch the video, and then form a comment and write it down. But I have here, in one instance, there was one person, he made 6 comments on 5 different posts in 1 minute and 47 seconds.
I was just about to ask you, could you highlight some of the cases where the timing is just so coincidental and within 1 minute, is that right?
1 minute
Under 2
47.
minutes. Wow. And how many comments again?
6.
Across?
across 5 posts.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I've been able to find people who are doing that on and off, but together all of the 263 were doing this.
Wow.
And I also look at the contents of their posts. Basically look at the patterns that I mentioned earlier. The way they seem to work is that they seem to have certain talking points, certain keywords that they need to mention, and then they just build variations of sentences around the keywords. And I have, and by analyzing all these comments at scale, I can find that keywords that seem to pop up at a rate that should seem more than expected.
Are you able to share some of the keywords, since it's one person that you scrutinized and on all this following that you checked?
Okay, let's say gaji minima 1,700. So that's just obviously to boost the talking point that we had a increase in the minimum wage. So let me try to find some comments for you that raises that specific talking point. Let's see.
These are summaries from the 263 accounts.
It's this case file that I compiled for Meta to look at. Under Kerajaan Madani, 150K isi rumah dah berjaya keluar kemiskinan, FDI tertinggi, ekonomi stabil, gaji minimum 1,700. Ini bukti pembangkang tiada plan konkret. Terus maju Kerajaan Madani. There's another one. Saya setuju dengan PM, inisiatif Madani memang tunjuk kesungguhan kerajaan untuk hapus kemiskinan, FDI tertinggi, gaji minimum RM1,700. Elektrik turun 14%, bukti nyata perubahan. So you see this kind of keywords keep coming up.
But what they posted are not exactly fake. They were just parroting a template, a summary of the past success stories, and then they parrot it saying, yeah, this is good, this is how it's done. Because there is also the concern that astroturfing might cross a layer where it becomes fake news. But what if it's not? What if it's something that's factual, that's being talked about, Dr. Loh?
Well, here's the thing. In the Malaysian space, fake news is not actually something, fake news is something that's actually quite a problem everywhere else. But in Malaysia, it's not as big of a problem as most people seem to think that it is. And primarily it's because, this issue of astroturfing that we have here in Malaysia is something that we've actually been experiencing far longer than many Western countries have been dealing with. I think for a lot of Western countries, the first real encounter that they received, the first experience that many of them received was really in the fallout of Cambridge Analytica all the way back in 2017.
Correct.
Essentially.
Yes.
That was the first time that this was seen as a real problem for them. But for us, if you go back to the history books, we've had ministers and various government officials who've talked about using these so-called Cybertroopers from all the way back from early 2000s essentially, and they have been in our digital political spaces for decades now at this point.
Like the Red Bean Army many years ago.
Red Bean Army and various other Cybertrooper names and whatnot as well. And the idea, and so it, as you said before, all of this has seemed to become very normalized within our political space. And the thing is, and so the way in which many of these sort of operatives operate is that they know, and if you've also looked at the way that fake news is handled in this country, they know that fake news has a very limited lifespan. And this can be very, very easily seen by how easy it is for fake news to be debunked. Because if you notice that whenever any kind of fake news gets circulated, what is the easiest way that you see it get debunked is that you see that the person who is targeted by it will just put out the statement, they put out a little image, they will blur whatever that misinformation was, slap the words fake news or palsu, and that is sufficient to tell people that, oh, this is fake news, I can ignore everything that's said about it. And so the efficacy of actual fake news being distributed doesn't actually have the same power that it does in other countries as a result of that. So the way that astroturfers or cybertroopers operate here is that they know that you cannot misrepresent facts too easily because it's quite easily debunked. And again, it's also a little bit problematic. So instead, you focus on very, very divisive, very polarizing political rhetoric, things that are based on emotions, things that are based on sort of like vague statements, abstract statements where when people read it based on certain sort of like biases or internal sort of like understanding that they have, they jump to certain conclusions. And those conclusions is what you can kind of control in the way that you craft the rhetoric that you put out there. So that was how a lot of our early cybertroopers used to sort of like present in that way. You know, they really were very, very effective at manipulating people's emotions, certain people's sort of like political understanding about certain things as well. But based on this report that came out, to be honest, the reason why you don't really see reports like this done in the Malaysian space is that I think, as you mentioned before, it is very, very difficult to actually prove that these networks actually exist. And the thing is, Malaysian cybertroopers have been around for a very long time.
Correct.
They were very, very good at hiding their work.
Correct.
And one of the easiest way to sort of like to tell that essentially is that they are very, very careful never to reuse phrases and I mean, they may use certain keywords, but they use it in a way whereby they're able to obfuscate it quite a bit. So they can hide their activities quite a lot. But just by reading the report that was presented, and I would say that the report was done very, very well. It was very, very thorough, very, very immaculate.
Yeah.
And just the very fact that they can find certain messages that are just sort of like duplicated like dozens of times already just shows that the cybertroopers that we have right now are so much sloppier. There's you could argue that they're maybe even lazier, or maybe the nature of the platforms requires that you don't need to actually try to hide your activities that much anymore. And that kind of tells you about how the nature of how astroturfing is working. Is that it's working on such a scale that you don't even have to hide it anymore already. And that's essentially it. So it's definitely still very, very damaging. And the thing is, for people who basically can see that it's happening, we are not the intended audience. It's kind of like, when you read about all these, like, these scams that are happening, right? And the question that you always get from people who are asking about scams is that, why is it that scammers always ask you the simplest questions that people will very easily know that you're a scam? And the reason is very simple. Scammers actually want to filter out people who know it's a scam, because if you know it's a scam, I don't want to waste my time on you. I'm going to move on to the actual person that I can mark. And similarly, astroturfers are doing the same thing. For a lot of us who are like perpetually on Twitter, we're on all these like political, we have like our finger on the political pulse. We are not the target audience for astroturfers because we are seeing things as they are essentially. But for the average person who only has very limited access to political information, they are the ones that are being targeted by astroturfers. And they are the ones that are susceptible to these kinds of tactics.
Okay, so my next question is for the both of you. Jun Lin, I want to know, based on everything that you've done to date, at what point do you think political communication crosses the line into manipulation, and who do you think gets to decide that line? I mean, you assessed hundreds of accounts. I saw the tables on your computer. It's crazy work. So what do you think about this? Who gets to say who is like the arbiter of this?
I think it crosses the line when it starts being manipulative. They are misrepresenting who they are. You see, it's not so much that we start having a problem when political parties start boosting their talking points. It's that they are doing this through accounts that are not their own.
Correct.
They are pretending to someone they are not. I even have one account here who claims to have been a former minister.
Wow.
To talk about how awesome Anwar work ethic is. And then I have another person who in his public profile claims to be a software engineer.
Okay.
In one post claims to be a university student, and another post claims to be working with foreign investors in some capacity.
I suppose.
So these are accounts that are engaging in deliberate deception.
Yeah.
In this case, the message being spread by the deception is relatively benign, but it's not hard to turn it around into something a lot more malicious. And all this is being allowed to exist on Meta's platform, regardless of its purpose. It's against their rules. And it's dangerous to even allow them to exist, in my opinion.
That's very well put. And I like the part where you highlighted about how this account was a software engineer and then a student, is that right, in another one? So I guess when you put it that way, the economic bracket comes along with it. Like, oh, look, this is a software engineer talking, so he must have something salient. Oh, look, this is a student talking, so maybe that particular issue affects them and it must be a salient point. I guess it's how you picture yourself that way. Like, I am just Yiswaree, I'm a journalist, but outside I put myself out as a doctor and then I'm sharing my opinions and this. And I think this overall shapes the entire account of how people see, oh, look, we have all these educated people who are in like a well economic bracket making comments, so it must be true, is it not, Dr. Loh? How do you see this? Who gets to decide?
I actually would like to offer a different view on that, because to be honest, being on the internet doesn't mean that you have to be who you say you are, because it is every individual's right to privacy, to present yourself in any way that you like, essentially. So if I want to go on the internet, create an account and pretend to be a person of a different gender, of a different ethnicity or whatever, on my own individual accord, that is every individual's right to do so, which is why I'm against a lot of the current proposals to do eKYC mechanisms in place.
Okay.
But the problem, of course, is when you have political entities who are misrepresenting multiple different accounts for specific agendas, essentially. And so that is which is why it is so difficult to actually definitively say whether these accounts are, because again, what we're seeing regularly right now is that you've got all these people who are very, very close followers to certain political parties or whatnot. They could be members or whatnot as well.
Yeah.
And they are just saying that I'm doing this on my own individual accord. I feel that this is my way of contributing to my political will and fight. And to be honest, that's a very difficult line to argue, because as we're sort of seeing in like the Western countries, this whole idea of the political culture war that's taking place. These kinds of methods of doing stock puppet accounts, but they argue that I'm doing it at an individual level, so I should be allowed to do that. And
so it's my freedom of expression for me to do what I want.
And to be honest, I don't think that that's necessarily a problem. I mean, I think it's a lot more nuanced in that we need to discuss it more. But as a result of that, I'm very reluctant to actually take a very hard stance on we need to ban accounts that are not 100% authentic, because who is 100% authentic online anyway? So on the issue of political communication, misabusing it, we can't just sort of like we cannot regulate the communication itself. Correct. Because that also means that you're going to affect regular people who may be presenting it, even if it's like incredibly inflammatory or very exaggerated or whatever, it's still their own opinions that deserve to be heard. So instead, the way that we actually need to be going for to regulate this is political financing, whereby we find ways of ensuring that, yes, because again, if you're doing things at a coordinated level on scale, that will require a substantial amount of funding that needs to be channeled in that manner. And if you can manage that, you can control that, you can regulate that, then that is a more effective way of stopping this at the at the coordinated level at the very least. Now, some parties also argue that, I've heard certain politicians who argue that I don't have Cybertroopers because I don't pay them, essentially.
Correct.
That just because they're not, but the thing is, just because you don't pay them in cash, you can pay them in kind. And that's what we often see, I'll give you a position, I'll give you a certain kind of thing. And that's where that can also come under political financing, whereby you control the sources of funding and you also look at the conflicts of interest that are taking place, whether this person has been given a position, this person has been given access to certain kind of contracts. And that, if you have a robust system in place for something like that can actually track at various different levels, that will be more effective at stopping these kinds of behaviors.
Political Financing Act is one thing that we should definitely have another session to talk about. It's a whole different book altogether. Jun Lin, we spoke about how a lot of the things that you found actually violated Meta's policies, but Meta says it did not find any wrongdoings, right? But dozens of these accounts, and we saw it happening, dozens of these accounts disappeared after your story was published. How do we reconcile with that fact? There's no wrongdoing, but then here are accounts that go missing. So
A slight correction. There are actually 76 out of the 263 accounts, and it was before the story was published,
Okay.
not after.
All right.
While I was working on this story, I was also contacting Meta about what I found, and while my colleagues Nanta and Christina has been trying to get comments up and down the chain of command from the usual suspects in the party and in the Prime Minister's office. I can't tell you what exactly was the feedback we got.
Okay.
Besides what we have already published, because there were things we heard off the record. But basically, the mood was uncomfortable. Some certain people didn't like our line of questioning, and I think it was the fact that they know we have a story coming out about this makes certain people nervous. So they might have preemptively shut down their accounts because they are not sure what's coming. I'm not sure if whether they have recovered accounts somehow after the story is up, but that's how it stood when just at the time the story came out. As for Meta's response, I'm not sure what happened. I've given them a dossier it was 13 pages of my most prolific examples.
And that's the one you were sharing with us earlier?
Yes, that was the one I was reading from. I identified specific accounts for them to look at. So far, last we heard from them, and this was many months ago, it's that they haven't found any sign of CIB.
Okay.
I've also checked their quarterly adversarial threat reports. I so far haven't seen anything about this. So this is still very much
a mystery.
Yeah.
At best.
At best.
But after everything that's happened and the report came out, were there any attempts made by Meta to reach out to you to explain what they have found or to follow up on the stories? Because that was a 3-part story, right? That
yes,
you did.
Yes.
Yeah.
Not to me directly, other than a few angry emails about them shutting down our Facebook pages.
Yeah.
After that, it was just radio silence. There were some. We did send them a number of follow-up questions.
Correct.
But we haven't heard back on those.
So, after the whole suspension issue, I remember how we were all scrambling to find out what went wrong. As a journalist who was and still is at the center of this whole astroturfing topic here in Malaysia, how does this whole experience make you feel? The way that responses were given to you, or the way certain answers were pretty nonchalant in their tone when it's an actual problem. How do you feel about the whole issue and the subsequent effects of it?
I think there's a lack of appreciation on the scale of the problem and also why this is a problem in the first place. So I think this will have to be an ongoing conversation if we are looking for a solution to it. Certainly, political financing can be a big part of that, but also just to put more pressure on platforms to enforce their own rules.
Dr. Loh, would you like to add on to that?
Well, I think this is a question that people have always been asking. It's going like, why is it that platforms are so reluctant to take down these so-called coordinated networks, even though by all means and purposes they are actually very, very obviously contravening the terms and conditions of using these platforms. And I have sort of like spoken with similar organizations that have done work like this, especially in the Philippines, and they also have mentioned that when they do deliver these extensive reports with very, very substantial evidence, that the platforms are very, very reluctant to take action on them. And just looking at it from a very cynical perspective, it's very simple. A lot of these coordinated networks generate large amounts of
Correct.
traffic, large amounts of interest, which in turn therefore generates profits for these companies.
Right.
If you look back at the first sort of like international sort of like foreign interference based troll networks that used to operate in America via Twitter and whatnot as well, there's been a lot of documented evidence that many of them actually sort of like go into the sort of like the misinformation, fake news generation space, where they generally just create these accounts and they produce fake information with the intent of basically generating income that self-sustains their industries. That was something that we're starting to see. I think Russia was very infamous for doing that for a long time as well. So in a certain sense, it is its own economy that it's trying to support. So while I mean we will never get anything public from any of these sort of like
so much
platforms.
of gatekeeping goes into this.
Yes, but that's one that is the most like obvious answer as to why there is so much reluctance to actually take action.
All right. Okay, gentlemen, I have a lot more questions coming for the both of you, but we will go for a short break. And when we come back, we are going to talk about, is this just how politics work? And if everybody is doing it, does that make this entire astroturfing thing accountable? We'll see you after a short break on Explain Sikit. Welcome back, everybody. So before we went on our short break, we talked about how Cybertrooper networks operate. Now we're going to talk about the harder question. Who benefits, who looks away, and why no one seems to be held accountable? And another important question is the cost, the monetary cost that astroturfing can have on parties who are implicated, affected. Dr. Loh, we had a short discussion earlier about what sort of financial implications astroturfing can have. And there were some interesting points that you brought up. Could you explain to us how like, from a branding perspective, if I'm going to be posting these comments and it's going to be at the expense of my political opponent, how do I put a monetary value on that? What sort of damage am I going to take, or he's going to take?
Well, as I said before, this entire Cybertrooper industry has been around for decades essentially, and because it's become an industry in itself, you actually have multiple different companies. You've got PR companies. Like if a short while ago, there was a report that was produced by Ideas that looked at these networks essentially, and they looked at how various political parties, political people at various levels of the political hierarchy actually can make use of various politically focused PR companies that actually have expertise and sort of like experience in doing this kind of work. So all of these things have been budgeted, all of these things have been tracked. They've got all sorts of evidence, they've got all sorts of like track records that they've proven over the last 20 over years essentially. And it's just that all of these things are happening behind closed doors. It's all basically the political underbelly of this country. We will, as the members, will probably, it's very unlikely we'll ever see the true figures of how all of these things are done. But in terms of the actual costs, there is actually a template that many of these political parties are following. So they know what it costs to sort of like boost their own campaigns, what it is to smear their opponents, what it is to sort of like misdirect attention from certain issues that are damaging to them. All of these things, there are playbooks that they can all follow essentially.
Jun Lin, in your work as a journalist again, what worried you more? Was it the operation itself or how easy it was to do it?
I think the most worrying part was how nonchalant the response has been. We even have political actors on the opposition say, yeah, so what? They'll be dumb if they don't do it.
Correct. I think we had this conversation happening as well.
It's lack of recognition of how disruptive this can be in our public discourse.
But just how disruptive can it be? Like, with Undi 18, you have more younger and younger people coming and they are more internet savvy. They question a lot more things. Can we still fool people with astroturfing? I mean, it does to a certain extent influence the whole atmosphere, but with more people who are savvy, can we look at some positive breakthrough that people would be a bit more curious, scrutinize more? that sort of pattern? Are we seeing that coming up?
This kind of operations, they can have very different levels of sophistication, and you might argue what I found was amateur work.
Correct.
That's why it was so easy to find and easy to identify their patterns and go down their playbook. I put in a lot of work, but it's just one person's work. There are operations that are a lot harder to detect. Like Dr. Loh mentioned earlier, the older Cybertroopers of maybe from Najib's era, for example, they are a lot more sophisticated. So they're not also always so easy to spot, even for someone who's a digital native. And you mentioned the TikTok generation and the Undi 18. I wouldn't be so sure they are also savvy, because they may have grown up in the internet, but developing the political savvy for this sort of thing is a different angle altogether.
A bit of an acquired skill. So my question, and to you also, Dr. Loh, especially after you read our report, first to Jun Lin, how did this whole experience from doing the report and the investigations and the legwork, how did it change the way that you read the comment section? Do you scrutinize it more? Extra, maybe?
How nice of you to assume that I read the comment section.
But it's part of what we do, so do you scrutinize it a bit more? Like, do you get a bit more antsy when you see certain things and it just flags off immediately that this is fake, like I have to check it?
It's part of my professional skill set to be able to spot claims that are just a bit fishy or just be naturally skeptical. So I don't think it has changed me that much, because I'm always been on a lookout for misinformation, disinformation, and coordinated attempts to spread this kind of messaging in the first place. And in fact, I had attended specific training courses in order to spot and document influence operations more systematically. So I don't think this investigation changes me so much. I'm just reading things carefully all along.
And Dr. Loh, did the Malaysiakini report, bring out probably a certain more scrutinizing aspect of it? You being in the academia, do you scrutinize comment sections more when you in your professional line, when you're teaching certain topics relating to misinformation, disinformation? How do you see this whole thing change after the report?
I think I sort of like mentioned this earlier, but to be honest, the report just made me feel a little bit disappointed. Not disappointed in the sense that the report was bad. It was disappointed in the sense that, our Cybertroopers have really declined in quality. That's really the takeaway. Because again, if you've read any of my work, you notice that I don't approach my work. I mean, I do a lot of extensive work on Cybertrooper activities and whatnot, but I don't focus so much on what we call the quantitative aspect of it. I don't try to show that, there are this number of accounts, this number of this, because for me, due to the nature in which older Cybertroopers used to operate, that was something that was either going to be so difficult to prove, it was going to be so inconclusive, or it was just a fool's errand essentially. So there's no point. And instead, what I always focus on was, let's look at what they're talking about. Focus on the sentiments that's being forwarded. And if you look at the work that I've done, that's where I focus more on what are the kinds of messaging that is being put out there and how it's being distributed and being circulated by people, because that's where the Cybertroopers' strength used to be. They would plant this idea of a seed of a certain kinds of idea, and they let people run with it, and they kind of curate the way that it grows in a certain direction. And you can kind of see the current crop of Cybertroopers still trying to do that, but the way that they control narrative is so much weaker, which is why you start to notice that whenever there's any kind of like issue that flares up in the public space, it takes on a certain kind of like racial or religious or some sort of like very like problematic narrative, and it just explodes out of nowhere. Meaning that you can probably, that it's very, very likely that the Cybertrooper team backed by certain groups that are trying to advance a certain agenda, but they have no idea how to control how the public moves with it, essentially. So that's where I'm focusing a lot of my work on. I did work regarding, how like public perceptions of, say, the initial invasion of Ukraine by Russia happened here. The way in which, like, the pro-Palestinian movement shifted a lot of its focus when there was like some issues that happened in the country, and how a lot of that is combined together with the way the anti-Rohingya movement also takes place here. So that's where a lot of my work focuses on. And so when I read this report, I was going like, wow, if I had started my work at this time, I would probably go into this direction, because it was so easy to actually figure out all of these things, where before you really just had to put your ear to the ground, try to track as many of these things as possible, and just try to piece out the different sort of like, okay, this is very likely part of a coordinated kind of sort of like messaging campaign that is going on behind the scenes, and you're just trying to see what are the key components. And the idea here is that if you highlight these things, then when you bring this to the public eye, hopefully the public sees it, and then they realize that, oh, maybe I am being manipulated, or maybe I need to shift my expectations regarding the issue, or find a much more reassess the situation at the very least. That's the approach that I always use. But right now, a lot of that is very black and white. It's very clear, very even my current work now, it's a lot easier to find a lot of this political messaging, because some of the coordinated attacks have become, like I said, so lazy that I think on Twitter we actually saw some examples where certain messages that were very obviously duplicated, they even had the quotation marks left in there with the instructions also in the tweet that came out.
So very ChatGPT probably.
I don't even think it's ChatGPT. I think they're just copy and pasting at whatever a scale and not even checking the work that they're doing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Jun Lin, after everything that you have written, the correspondences that you've gotten or attempted to get, what do you think Malaysians should take away from this very, very, very important investigation that is astroturfing? And what's the one behavior you think the public needs to unlearn when engaging politically online?
I think Malaysians should be aware that there are people who want to manipulate at least what they think about key issues, and they are willing to pay a substantial sum of money. They are willing to mobilize substantial resources in order to do it, and you may not see it coming.
Wow. What do you mean you can't really see it coming?
Like I said, this influence operation that I managed to uncover, it was quite blatant, but there were also different levels of sophistication. Like, for example, the older ones that are better at hiding, that Dr. Loh mentioned. Those, I don't think those would have gone away completely. They're probably still lurking somewhere.
And Dr. Loh?
I think the way you phrased the question was may happen, right? I think that this has been happening for decades already. And I think I've said this before, that virtually every major political party in this country is using Cybertroopers to some degree of thought. Many, of course, will argue that, oh, no, I'm not paying them, therefore they're not really Cybertroopers. Or they're just saying that these are party hopefuls. They want to support me. They're acting on their own behalf, but I mean, they're just following what you're doing anyway. So again, there's going to be a lot of kinds of excuses and all sorts of kinds of explanations to sort of say that they're not actually engaging in this. And to be honest, because at the end of the day, I think as you mentioned just now, the opposition didn't really see this as a problem, right? And fundamentally, it's because this is a completely unregulated space, essentially. Political communication technically in this country is largely regulated only in the traditional physical space. You can only put ads in TV and whatnot. You're limited to what you can do there as well. But in the digital space, it is a complete unregulated, it's a free-for-all, essentially.
Correct.
And so it is for this very reason. And actually, if you look back at the history of how the digital space is regulated, you notice that when online media, like Malaysiakini, Free Malaysia Today, all started to come up, right? Malaysia at the time was infamously had incredibly repressive regulations. We still technically have those regulations regarding the traditional media space, print media, broadcast media, radio, television, and everything. But they did not extend any of these things when the internet started to come about. They could have easily just said that, if you want to be a news media in Malaysia that claims to be Malaysia, you must have a license. A simple move like this would be enough to curb the space, but they didn't. Because at the time, we know this now, that they were harnessing that, we need to keep the internet as open as possible because it also allows us to run these black ops, these Cybertrooper teams that can operate in the darkness, and we can control that. And they were very effective at doing that for a long time, which is why you will notice that only under this current administration, we are finally seeing actual repressive controls over the internet. We have never seen this kind of regressive regulation on the internet freedoms in any of the past administrations. Only under this administration, suddenly we're starting to see that, we are going to control, you cannot have an account, you must have EKYC, we're going to regulate all the different platforms, all the different companies and things like that. It is so much more aggressive than it was before because the current administration knows that the Cybertrooper industry has become so big in itself, they've become so powerful, they've become so mercenary now at this point.
Correct.
And they have so much power over manipulating public sentiment. And at the same time, they are not the ones that have to deal with the fallout. Opposition parties I'm not claiming any opposition party, but any kind of party that isn't government that is stoking certain kinds of very political contested issues, very, very very sensitive issues, very problematic concerns, and letting it explode, and only the government has to deal with it, basically. So that is why they are now clamping down on this as a result of that. But but at the end of the day, despite all of these dangers, the political gain from these kinds of indirect political communication is still so immense, it is so powerful that no party is willing to give that up by going down any kind of legislation for it.
This is going to be a protracted, long battle then. That's what I'm foreseeing. All right, we have come to the end of our show. And the takeaways that I think our audience should know from this is that this isn't just about Anwar Ibrahim and how social media is working for him. This is about how power performs online and how consensus can be easily manufactured, and that can be very dangerous on many accounts. And another important takeaway from this is how you can be a responsible social media user and how you should exercise your power well. And with that, I take my break. Thank you very much, Jun Lin and Dr. Loh, for your time and insights. A big thank you to the both of you. So many things to share, so many things that we must continue talking and keep the conversation going for such an important topic. And to our audience, don't forget to follow us on our social media for updates and more great stories like Jun Lin's Astroturfing breakthrough articles. I am Yiswaree Palansamy signing out for Explain Sikit, and I'll see you in another banger of an episode soon.